how do you evaluate your people and how do you keep them motivated?
We have a system in place, obviously, from a corporate standpoint where we have reviews and then we have, raises and bonuses and all of that. I'm not a cheap boss. I like the 401k plan and I like full dental and I like maternity leaves that are paid. And I treat the team as if I would want to be treated if I was working for the company as well.
Welcome to Thrive, a Paychex business podcast, your blueprint for navigating everything from people to policies to profits. And now your host, Gene Marks.
Hey everybody, it's Gene Marks and welcome back to another episode of the Paychex THRIVE podcast. I am really super excited to have Nate Berkus with me today. Nate is a renowned American interior designer. He is an author. He's a television personality known for his elevated personal design aesthetic. He's also a product designer, and I did mention he's an author. Founded in 1995, his firm Nate Berkus Associates handles global residential and commercial projects. He gained fame as a frequent guest on the Oprah Winfrey Show and starred in design shows like Nate and Jeremiah by Design. Nate, first of all, thank you so much for joining. I'm really excited to have you here.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And Gene, I just have to note, You have a slight Philly accent that my mother's whole side of the family has. My grandparents had it. My mother still has it. So it immediately makes me comfortable.
Yeah,
my mother grew up in Allentown.
Got it.
And my grandparents lived on Chestnut Hill.
Got it. So I went to Chestnut Hill Academy when I was a kid and grew up in Germantown. And I'm really bad with accents. So people tell me I do have like a Philly accent or a slight accent. And I'm like, I can't even tell. I can't even tell. So I'm glad that you mentioned that. And, I have to tell you as well, like I have had a recent appreciation of design work and interior design work. We live right in Center City, Philadelphia. My wife and I, we empty nested it down here like 10 years ago. And so we had an interior designer help us with our apartment just over the past year or two. And it's just it's just a skill it's just a unique skill for people to like look at a room and know what to do with it. So where did you learn how to do this?
I actually don't have a design degree. I have a degree in sociology and French from a liberal arts college, Lake Forest College in Illinois. But my mother was an interior designer growing up. And so I was always surrounded by design as a kid, wallpaper samples, and our home was kind of a bit of a lab. And then when I graduated from college, I started working at an auction house, and I realized that what was the most interesting thing to me about the world of design was actually the furniture and the decoration and the history of things, which is why today, almost 30 years later, my firm and I focus on using a lot of vintage things, a lot of antiques, a lot of things from the secondary market, and obviously mixed with new, and you have to be aware of technology. But I really got the bug. And my father was the founder of the National Sports Collectors Convention. So I grew up behind a card table with baseball cards. So like if you combine those two things, sort of the early sensitivity and awareness of environments mixed with the mentality of being a diehard collector, I think that's what really set me off on my career at an early age.
I love that. It's funny too, because when I think about when we did our apartment, like we have a fairly modern design. It's an open space, kind of place. We live in a building where each floor is its own unit, which is amazing.
Great.
Yeah, the elevator
that's great.
opens up. So it's cool. But I'm obsessed with history as well, and particularly living in Philadelphia. Like we really wanted to make it a point to have like artwork around that was like street scenes of Philadelphia from like, the early 1900s and
cool.
You know what I mean? Like that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But it's a challenge for a designer to kind of mix in the modern with the, with the old,
I think that's always what to me is the most interesting thing. I've always believed that our home should tell our story, not only who we are now, but who we've been. And then perhaps most importantly, who we aspire to be. And there's a way to translate that into your environment. And that's what I've focused on all these years is really sort of crafting spaces that kind of rise up to greet the family or the people that live there. And it's a deeply personal endeavor. It's a creative endeavor, but it's a very personal endeavor. And I've found that actually the big connector is surprisingly vulnerability. Like I have to be vulnerable with the client to tell them what I'm comfortable with and what my take on it and my interpretation, but they also have to be vulnerable and honest with me. I need to understand what stage they're in life. I need to understand what things have happened to them. I need to, have a deeper knowledge. You don't have to have that. You don't have to have that relationship with your client if you're a designer, but you certainly end up with a home that is much more special in 1,000 ways if you do.
I'm going to jump around on my questions, and I do want to get into your sort of origin story. But you bring up the clients that you are dealing with, and you're in New York, so I'm assuming is most of your work in the New York area?
It's not. Our principal office is in Chicago. Okay. We have a team of around 50 people split between 3 offices: New York, Chicago, and LA.
Okay.
We work all over the place. I've been at this for a really long time, built a really decent business with a lot of repeat clients. And I love what I do. I'm not out of ideas. I'm 54. I'm still excited when we get a phone call about somebody's new house.
How many people in your firm right now? Approximately?
Around 50.
How do I know, like, if I'm hiring, if I want to work with you, and I'm a client of yours, I want to work with you, how do you deal with separating and getting your other people involved in a way that your clients are accepting of that? You know what I mean?
There's really no way to grow a design firm that with your name on the door there's no way to scale it without having projects that you have a very sort of high level touch on. So, most of my clients and the firm's clients know not to expect to see me at every presentation. We're very upfront about that in the beginning. There's certain projects that demand me be there, and that's a decision that we factor into the budget because I'm more expensive than anyone else on my team. And we're open about that, at the inception. I normally am there for most the projects that I'm handling personally. I'm there for most of the very important pivotal meetings, and then I turn it over to the team to do the secondary rooms and things like that. But the client knows that I've always looked at it before it goes out the door. And if somebody that represents me is suggesting something, it's because I'm suggesting it as well.
You can definitely help me. I mean, for example, my firm, and we do like technology and financial consult. We're called the Marks Group. So my name is on the firm,
Yeah.
And I've often wondered, which basically means same as what you just said. I have to get involved in projects big or small because that's what people kind of expect because your name is on the firm, And I'm wondering, have you ever considered, an alternative direction? You are sort of straitjacketed into having to do that too, because it is your name on the firm. Have you ever considered rebranding yourself, or did you ever have that conversation with yourself before you launched your firm?
I never had. I was 24 when I had 24. I was 24 years old when I launched the firm. I promise you, I did not have that conversation. I was drinking beer out of a hat. I was an idiot. Right. But I think that somehow, and I'm not sure if this is just reputation based alone or what it is, or it's about the efficacy of my team and how great my staff is. There are many projects in the firm that I don't touch at all. I have a partner in Chicago who is brilliant at what she does. She runs that office. She's got clients coming to her based on her social media, on her reputation. Obviously, I pay for the PR around her and promote her as well because it makes it, all ships rise. But she, Lauren Gordon, is extremely talented. And in fact, it's sort of funny. I've been on a book tour recently and we were in Charlotte, North Carolina. And she said to me, after your book signing, I'm going to come because I have a walkthrough with these clients who we've renovated their house and, you should come. And it literally, I tried to be additive to the walkthrough. But, everything had been discussed. Every finish had been decided. Lauren was most definitely in charge. The client knew Lauren was the boss. I knew Lauren was the boss. Lauren knew Lauren was the boss, and it works out.
Right. I'm curious, as to what projects you do decide to get involved in. And do you get involved in projects now, or are you spending your time mostly? Okay. So give me projects come across your desk. You know what your firm is working on. What are the projects you decide to get deeply involved in versus the ones that you just said you have less involvement with?
Definitely the ones with a personal connection. Definitely the ones with like sort of top budget, that require that. Oftentimes it's personality driven. Like the client won't work with the firm unless I'm a part of the project. And so there's obviously an awareness around that. And then the ones that I think actually are going to be fun for me. I've been doing this for so long that, sometimes there's a young couple that comes in and they've got their first apartment and they've got a decent budget, and it wouldn't be our biggest project or our longest project or our most complicated project or even our most creative project, but I feel like a connection to the enthusiasm or the energy around something. And, it's interesting for me. I did not have a desk for 15 years. The firm was based in Chicago. We had the LA office. I've moved around a lot. And it wasn't until my children, I have two kids, 11 and 8, started school full time, that I opened this office in New York City for me to run. I needed a place to go. So often a lot of the projects that come through the New York office that I run, I have a pretty heavy hand in. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Because I'm here. So
sure. It's funny, even at this stage, like my firm, we've got about 600 clients. There are some projects I do get involved with. And, I've got a long-term client. I mean, like literally, I don't want to even date myself, Nate, but like 30 years I've been working with these people. And I still go out and visit them a couple times a month. I used to do like financial consulting for them, and I still stay involved for like a nominal fee. And I always feel like it's really important to keep your toes in the water,
Yeah.
And I don't know what your thoughts are on that. Like, is that part of the reason why you continue to take on projects, is because your profession changes, right?
Yeah. I mean, listen, I have to keep my toes in the water in several ways because my business is multi-pronged. I have licensing, I have publishing, I have the TV and entertainment side. So part of me going on television and doing television shows or appearances on talk shows and things like that is keeping my toes in the water in that arena. But in the design firm, I remember many years ago, I was at a bit of a crossroads. I was on the Oprah Show regularly. I was pretty famous across the country here in the US. And it was in, I think, almost 300 countries, that show. So it was funny when I would travel that people would recognize me in Singapore. And I was like, what is going on? But it must be. But it was, there was a moment where I thought to myself, look, I've got all this licensing, these products that I've designed that are at different points of sale around the country, these deals in place. I've got TV, I've got publishing, I've got, at the time I had 2 New York Times best-selling books on under my belt. Why am I answering the phone when somebody's complaining that their sofa's late or there's a nick on their dining room table? Like, this doesn't make sense. And I realized exactly what you just said. The design firm is actually where everything else was born from. I was a designer first before I did any of these other things. And it's also something that I deeply, deeply love and feel very connected to. So to me, I didn't feel like I'd have the credibility that I wanted unless I was still very much involved in the day-to-day design process. It may not have been the most, brilliant financial decision, but I don't think every decision should be based on that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And you know what? I mean, my involvement still day to day or week to week with certain clients, it gives me content to talk about.
Yep.
I mean,
absolutely.
Because you're looking for these new ideas. The other thing I also found, I don't know if you feel the same way, is that it did kind of ground me. I mean, I don't know, say you're traveling, you're celebrity, you're on the Oprah Show or whatever. There is something very grounding about like, well, on Monday, I'm going to be back and getting yelled at this client because,
100%
on the table,
Well, I'm in the service industry.
Yeah.
What we do is a high end service and a creative service, but make no mistake, a designer is, I've always viewed myself, let me just say, universally, I think we're all the same. I believe in that. I don't see people for their place in society or their bank account or whatever it is as a person. But beyond that, as a business person, we've all heard, I'm sure your audience has heard the horror stories, the snobbery that goes on of, the design community and this rarefied air and people speaking in a vocabulary that other people don't have just to intimidate them into spending money. I've never subscribed to any of that. So, for me, somebody trying to impress me is the least interesting meal I'll ever have. It just happened to me the other day in some city. I was seated next to somebody who wanted me to know how important they were. And I just thought, oh my God, like, please kill me. And are you going to finish your fries? But it is humbling. And it should be humbling because, to work in an industry that is based on service, fundamentally, you've got to check your ego at the door. And everybody that works for me also has to check their ego. We have lines that we don't allow to be crossed after 30 years in business, obviously, but that's a different conversation.
Okay. You have been doing this for 30 years, since the age of 24. I still want to get to your origin story, but I have more questions just about current day.
Yeah, I like this.
You are in an industry. I mean, we deal with technology and financial, and there's a level of difficulty, with clients in doing that. But Jesus, I mean, I can't even imagine the clients that you are dealing with. So you've been doing this for 30 years. You have not jumped out the window yet, but you must deal with some pretty tough clients. So what have you learned? What can you share with us that you've learned about dealing with difficult clients and difficult customers?
I think first and foremost, you've got to advocate for yourself and your team and your process.
Okay.
It doesn't matter who somebody is, but when somebody feels like they know how to run a project better, or they know how to run a renovation differently, or and they're used to being told yes, and they've hired all these people around them, the owner's reps and all these things. People are very surprised to hear no. And we don't offer, I'm sure you experience this too, but we don't just say no without a reason. We say no because we've built a foundational set of principles, of ways of executing projects, of ways of double checking and triple checking every detail. And when somebody comes in and doesn't have any respect for that and wants something faster or wants something that breaks from the way we know things work for us, I say no. Mm-hmm. Go do it yourself.
Right.
That I think is probably the most important thing I've learned over all of these years.
Do you fight customers? Have you ever raised your voice at a customer or a client?
I've raised my voice only when I'm a little bit of a mother hen because I have very little turnover in my offices. Right. Especially amongst the executive and the senior team. And so when it comes to me, or when I witness somebody being disrespectful or rude, we have like a zero tolerance for it. And we're lucky enough that we, have an established enough business, and we have, great clients and great relationships with clients that, when somebody takes that tack with us, it really gets them nowhere. And I'm very, very happy to put them in their place. And will I raise my voice? Sure. I actually don't really raise my voice. Like, I don't raise my voice to my kids. I don't raise my voice to my husband. That's a rare occurrence for me to get that upset. But I'm very, very firm, and I'm very, very clear. And I know I'm a decent communicator, and I'll say, look, I'm not trying to make this more complicated, but this is not going to work. So if you feel like this is how you move through something, we don't need to be doing this together. It's very clear to me. I'm happy to execute the project, but we've done this for 30 years. We require you to respect our process, just like you're requiring me to deliver something that is hopefully a bigger dream that you could have dreamt for yourself around this.
Okay. What's your approach to dealing with problems? You are dealing with construction people, you're dealing with freight companies, you're dealing with a lot of moving parts on your projects, and just stuff happens all the time. And I'm sure then you have clients that get, angry because it happens. So
Listen,
when that happens, which I'm sure it happens, it's already happened 30 times today.
Yeah, exactly.
What's your approach to dealing? How do you do it?
I like accountability. I love accountability. I think it's super important. I like when people jump in and admit that they've made a mistake immediately, or at least acknowledge that someone else has made a mistake. Our clients are paying us to run the project and create and craft the spaces. So we are not in control of every vendor, like you just mentioned. I mean, we have, furniture makers and the guy who makes iron in New Hope and, whatever, it doesn't matter. But the point is that they're working through us and we're the funnel to all of that. So really the first thing out of my mouth is, I see this, you're not wrong. If it's a mistake on our end, it's instant. It was our mistake. We will rectify it. That is part of the benefit of working with an established company, I think, in any industry. But there's ownership, accountability, and honesty in every situation. And they may not like what the actual answer is. We can't get a hold of the guy that's making your railing. He dropped off the face of the earth, but I am on it and I have, 5 potential solutions and I'm aware of it and I know it and I feel it and I'm sorry. And, but this is the reality and this is what we're dealing with. And I found myself as a customer being diffused almost instantly when somebody says, you're right. And here's my ideas to navigate it. What I can't stand is, what do you mean? What are you talking about? There's nothing to see here, folks. And, that's very juvie kind of behavior, especially in my business.
Yeah, I agree. People should just step up and be accountable. If they make mistakes, people make mistakes
all the
time.
Just own it. It happens.
And fix it.
It's how we run it internally too. I love when somebody says, I ruined this. I'm like, great. All right, let's fix it.
Speaking of internally, so again, I'm just comparing your business and mine, which they're service businesses, but they're different. Like when I hire people, I'm looking for people with certain technical skills in a CRM application like Salesforce or Microsoft Office. Yours is way more softer than that. I mean, you're hiring people that have to have that sort of creative and business-like approach. Project management people you need as well. People that can understand how to read, a budget and adhere to it, at the same time turning around and saying, this would look great in your room, but not this. I mean, that's a tough find. So where do you find people, Nate? And also, how do you are you like me, where like you read through the resumes, you have other people talk to a candidate, and then in the end, you're like, I just guess I'm going to take a leap of faith with this person and hope that what they're saying is going to come true. How do you evaluate people to hire?
When I opened the New York office, I hired the team that I wanted to be around.
Yep.
And about a year later, things were going haywire across departments. And I called Phoebe Craig, who runs my company in the Chicago office and has worked for me for 27 years. And I said, what happened? And she said, you're terrible at this. This is not, you're literally like, this is you. You didn't ask anybody. Yeah. You didn't ask anybody if what they thought. You hired these people. And you liked their haircut or you liked their this. I don't even know what you were thinking. She goes, this is not the job for you. So, I said, okay, you're right. Well, we need to reorg this office. I need your help. Who should interview besides me? And she said, do you want to interview them? I said, not really. I want only like the top candidates. And then I'll have like sort of an informational conversation just so I can get a sense of their personality. But please, like it was called out that is not my skill set. And that's fine.
That's great. That's great. So basically, you've identified the stuff that you do well, and you hopefully have other people in the organization that can do things that you don't do as well. And everybody, has that. Let me ask you about Phoebe as a good example. So 27 years she's been with you. That's a reflection of you. I mean, she was a great hire, obviously. Obviously you treat her well. What do you do for employees like that to keep them working for you? I mean, somebody like her, I'm sure, is going to have plenty of opportunities elsewhere. It's tough to retain talent. It always is. How do you evaluate your people and how do you keep them motivated?
We have a system in place, obviously, from a corporate standpoint where we have reviews and then we have, raises and bonuses and all of that. I'm not a cheap boss. I like the 401k plan and I like full dental and I like maternity leaves that are paid. And I treat the team as if I would want to be treated if I was working for the company as well. So that's always kind of been a governing principle for me. But I think in my firm, it goes a little bit deeper than that. We really know each other. And for the most part, we really like each other. And part of knowing, people in a mid-sized business is what we just talked about. Knowing who's good at what, sort of highlighting that and paving the way within their job description so that their skill sets are matched to their actual responsibilities. And, in design, as a concrete example, I have one person who's phenomenal with floor plans and spatial planning, but they're terrible with fabrics. So we bring somebody junior on that team to deal with all the fabrics and no one feels bad about it. They know the junior person knows they're great at pulling together a fabric scheme. And the senior person doesn't want to do it anyway, because it's kind of the thing you always put off when you're not good at something. We're very, very honest as a company with each other. We are the management, Lauren, Phoebe, me, we have very honest conversations about who's doing well and who's not, who's challenged, how we can support them. It doesn't always work out, obviously. That's, super unrealistic. But I think I've created a company where people's best qualities are celebrated. And I think that has a lot to do with the longevity. Above and beyond that, I'm pretty easy once I have somebody's faith and confidence and, you want to take an extra day here or a week here. I don't, at this point, I think you've got to start treating people like family if they've worked for you for that many years. So they know that they've got the autonomy and the freedom. They also are aware of the expectation that their work will be done and that we won't be, the company won't suffer for any reason. But I've never said no to a senior person wanting to take another vacation or, and we do funny things. I've helped buy homes for people on my team. Good. It's a lot of women that work for me. They like nice stuff. Right. Everybody gets a gold watch at 10 years, right. A Chanel bag, I like that stuff too. And I know that it makes you feel good to, be acknowledged in that way. Sometimes it's something tangible and something expensive you wouldn't buy for yourself.
All right, let's go back to the origin. You started this company at the age of 24. I frequently, I meet people that are of that age, even younger. Everybody's got that sort of startup buzz. They want to be an entrepreneur. They want to start things up. And my standard advice has always been like, dude, you're in your early 20s, work somewhere for 10 years and get knowledge of a business and an industry. And then, then start your company once you're, in your 30s, because it seems like you would have a lot more ideas and maturity to do that. You didn't do that. You started at 24. What are your thoughts about starting a business that young? Would you have done, well, your example is not a great one because you've scaled it successfully, but do you think that's a good road for people to start at that age?
No, I don't think it's a good road. I think it can be an exceptional road, but it's rare.
Right.
I think that, and I don't think I'm special, like for having been able to start at that age and build a business like I have. I think I got very lucky in many ways. And I'm also a big proponent of when a door opens, you have to walk through it with your head held high and you have to be very conscientious about reputation from day one and all of these things. But what I will say is that I think the world has changed since I started my firm 30 years ago in extremely significant ways. And I think internships are wildly important if you're not going to go work for somebody. I was an intern. We take interns. Not the internships where you're just running to get the coffees and whatever, but the internships at companies where they really want to involve you in the operational side and the creative side and whatever it is. I don't ever look back and wish that I would have had a boss. I worked for an auction house. I worked there for 2 years and then I quit to start my firm. But I think somewhat distinctively, I already had kind of a client base in Chicago at that time, people that I'd met through real estate brokers and clients from the auction house. So I wasn't starting hoping the phone would ring. I started it because I had an opportunity in front of me to actually start doing what I wanted to do.
By the way, while you collect your thoughts, it's key advice. When I started my business, I was actually working at a full-time job, and I worked, overtime on my business, attracting clients that I could transition out. You know what I mean? As opposed to just taking a leap and hoping, like you just said, that the phone was going to ring. And it sounds like you did something similar, right? I mean, you had built up at least a prospective revenue stream so that you were not just. I
cultivated relationships with people in Chicago that I knew were ancillary to design, real estate, auction house, trust and estate lawyers, just a group of people. And I got to know them. I wasn't really hustling at that point because I was working for the auction house, but people were watching what I was doing at the auction house. And then they'd say, my boss, the woman who owned the auction house, said, will you help me redo my living room while I was working for her? And I thought to myself, I don't really want to work for anybody. I'm much better. I knew myself well enough then that, she had a Monday morning meeting that you had to be in the door at 8 a.m. or you had to pay her $5. And I was never in the door at 8 a.m. on a Monday. So, and $5 at that time was like my lunch money one day. So it was really annoying. Like I was like, I can't believe it, but I just couldn't get in the door. And I really do think I started my business so I wouldn't have to be on someone else's schedule. I really do think that was like the core thing. Like if I wanted to, get there at 9:08, I could do so. And, even with all my responsibilities, that still is one of the small luxuries that I retain for myself. I have to be certain places at certain times. But like my team knows that if I land in a city, don't book me an hour after I land. Give me a beat to unwind and check in and unpack and, get myself together.
Final question, I'll let you go. It's great. I have many more questions to ask you, but we have limited time. But you had mentioned just a few minutes ago about, when the door opens, you take the opportunity and walk through it. And I actually just kind of want to follow up on your thoughts on that. I imagine that there are, like everybody else, there's a percentage of luck that got you to where you are, but there is the action of taking advantage of that luck and doing something with it. I am sure, I am positive that your first appearance on the Oprah Winfrey Show, you were probably shitting yourself. And you're unsure as to whether you're going to do it and whatever. And you probably said to yourself, no, I'm going to do this. And it's outside of my wheelhouse, but I'm going to do this. And I'm sure that you have had other projects that you have taken on that you weren't, again, outside of your wheelhouse, but you're like, nope, I'm going to give this a shot because I think I can do it and whatever. Talk to me a little bit, give us some takeaway thoughts for other business owners that are here about following opportunities, walking through that door that opens.
Two things. One, my father was an entrepreneur. He had marketing businesses and he founded the National Sports Collectors Convention in Anaheim, California in the 70s. Cool. I had and he always said to me, even as a kid, bet on yourself because nobody else is going to. So that's been like a mantra for me. Anytime I've been uncomfortable walking through that door, the first makeover on Oprah, the first meeting with linens and things about developing a product line, I've found myself at a conference room table knowing that I had no idea and no experience in what I was about to embark on, but I've always bet on myself because I knew no one else was going to. Very important lesson my father gave me. I will also say that equally as important, and I use myself as an example here, I was asked to be on the Oprah show. not to be a regular on the Oprah Show, not to sign a contract with Harpo. I was asked to be a guest on the Oprah Show. And when I did that first segment, I was the last person to leave the location. I made sure all the producers were taken care of. I gave it every single thing I had that first time. And then I did that exact same thing the second time. And then I did that exact same thing the 70th and the 80th and the 200th time that I appeared on that show. It wasn't Oprah Winfrey was on the air. The Oprah Winfrey Show aired for 25 years. There were 6 segments for every episode. Think about how many people had the opportunity to be a guest on the Oprah Winfrey Show. It's not everybody, I'm aware of that. But over 25 years, taping 2 shows a day, 6 episodes, 6 segments per show, there were a lot of people that walked through those doors. And for me, it's never been about how you walk through the door. It's what you do to stay in the room. And I knew that my first makeover was going to be my last makeover was going to be as important as my first. Not just the quality of what I was doing or the ideas that I was bringing to the table, but the effort. And so I never rested on my laurels throughout that entire experience, and I still don't today.
Nate Berkus is an interior designer, an author, a television personality as well. He runs his own firm, Nate Berkus Associates, with offices in 3 cities. Nate, great conversation. I really appreciate you taking the time to come on. Lots more to talk about someday in the future, but for now, you've given us a lot of great thoughts to take away with. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Gene, and enjoy the Center City apartment. It sounds great.
We will. We certainly will. We are already. Do you have a topic or a guest that you would like to hear on Thrive? Please let us know. Visit payx.me/Thrive topics and send us your ideas or matters of interest. Also, if your business is looking to simplify your HR, payroll, benefits, or insurance services, see how Paychex can help. Visit the resource hub at paychex.com/works. That's WORX. Paychex can help manage those complexities while you focus on all the ways you want your business to thrive. I'm your host, Gene Marks, and thanks for joining us. Till next time, take care.
This podcast is property of Paychex Incorporated 2026, all rights reserved.